What's up, my precious little pack, and welcome back to VEGA Conflict. So the mobilization has begun, so I'm going to do a quick run over of the prizes and what I would recommend from the list, as well as potential strategies for low levels to fight the low-level brigades or vanguards, depending on fittings. These are all potential fittings. I haven't actually tested them out, but you'll have to ensure they're all completely mark upgraded, and they're going to be tier 3 ships because, again, low build time, well, lower than the other tiers, fairly easy to mark upgrade once you get the fleet set up to farm everything you want, and things like that. But let's get right into the mobilizations list. So the heavy surge beam is here. Everything from the previous event and the regeneration converter. I covered everything including the Zepyhr Thrusters. Now let's take a peek at the regeneration converter 3. It gets 360 energy per second recharge rate after 10 seconds of not being hit. And the trade-off is it loses 2,880 shield points. That isn't that bad in comparison to how much the shields give and how much the armor boosts them and things like that. So for certain fittings, that would actually be pretty good, along with the Zepyhr Thrusters to help reduce weight for low-level builds that you're not mark upgrading. But if you're mark upgrading, I would trade Zepyhr Thrusters out for harmonic chase thrusters in turn with the movement speed. But if you're going for lower level mark upgrades and you want some alien weapons, Zepyhr Thrusters all the way. We have the energy stasis resistor 1. And what it does, reduces damage by 25%, which is standard for everything, and reduces stasis by 15%, pardon. 15%, that ain't that bad, but in turn it's not that good. I would only see it being useful on the cutter with its natural built-in stasis resistance as well of 25%, so 40% overall, and then it gets the overdrive when it gets hit by stasis. It just becomes so much better. Everything else has already been covered. Resources are always mandatory for anybody who's trying to upgrade anything. Honestly, wasn't anything else new added other than the regeneration converter, and I'm waiting for the decimation to get my hands on some energy resistors. No, some energy resistant armor. Some of the... can't remember the name of it. But that's going to be that. And as for targets that you're going to be hitting, you can use any low-level fleets you want, but ensure they're completely mark upgrades so you get those high damage buffs. So if you're going to go after a low-level Vanguard, I would highly recommend you use a mixture of heavily armed cruisers with heavy shielding, as well as a few destroyers, and allow the destroyers to open fire and everything first. And the reason I say destroyers is for their damage boost against cruisers, not battleships, because you can actually outdamage a battleship with a destroyer and outrange it if you play carefully. But in this case, you'd be using the cruiser with high long-range energy damage against the oligarchs, bastion cruisers in their level 40 Vanguard fleet, and you'd be using the cruisers of your fleet, all Mark IV, for the heavy damage buff against their cutters, so you'd be doing increased damage versus them. And the objective would be try and keep your fleet together, so if you need to, add a Midgard for a little bit more mobility, and try and keep your fleet together, but try and ensure that your destroyers don't come under fire, because unlike your cruisers, they're not going to be fit to take a hit. They're going to be fit just to fight. So if they get hit, they're going to take a lot of damage, and you're going to want to have energy resistors on every single ship you put in the fleet, because the primary damage type that the Altairian fleet does is energy. So what you're going to want is you're going to want the energy resistor 3, which, let's take a look at the credits. Is it available currently? Nope. The only one I would recommend is the energy resistor 3. I know it takes a lot of blood amber, and it takes a while to get the blood amber, but the 30% reduction is always beneficial. And as for how you'd fight the targets, I would say get a running start, turn your carrier around right away, have it head back in the opposite direction with the way it's facing when it spawns, have your cruisers and your destroyers strafe backwards, or have your cruisers turn backwards and push your destroyers backwards. So until the enemy comes within range and starts shooting your cruisers, you're going to want to be pushing your destroyers backwards. When the enemy starts shooting you for the first time, that's when you turn your cruisers around and immediately open fire on them as quickly as possible. And the first bastion that you're going to want to engage will be the one on the right side of the screen. So when you spawn in, it'll be down over here, along with 3 of the Cavalier cutters. So what you're going to want to do is when they come up, you're going to want, again, the cruisers to lead the way against the cutters. You're going to want to heavily engage them in close range combat, while your destroyers focus the bastion cruiser, because you're going to want to burn it out as quickly as possible. And you can always add your, replace the Midgard I suggested with a Ragnarok for additional damage support for the squadrons. And that should be a little bit better. As for how you'd fight the opposite side, when the opposite side is coming in, it'll again be a bastion and 3 of the Cavalier cutters coming in. The Cavaliers will arrive first, so you'll want to again send your cruisers in first to counter them wherever they happen to be. And then you're going to want to bring your destroyers around once again to fight the other bastion. And the objective is to have the damage type boosts target the ships that they do increased against. So in the case of the destroyers, they're going to be targeting the bastion because it's a cruiser. In the case of the Revelations, and let's just say you're using tier 3, because that's what I'd recommend you using the Revelations, have them attack the Cavaliers. As for how many of the ships you'd want and what fitting you'd want, there is 2 fittings that I would recommend. One, let's take mine for example. You can go for a fitting like this to have fairly low damage, or you can drop all the armor, rely on the shielding, and drop the fusion thruster and rely heavily on range, and you can actually take a few of these up to level 3. Actually, one of those is level 3. You can take a few of them up to level 3. Thermal beams if you have it. If not, I would recommend the impulse if you've earned it from a planet strike, because it is better than the thermal beam in range, as well as a slight damage per second of only, what, 2 damage per second higher. But the fitting would be you're going to want heavy energy resistance shielding, because again, they do heavy energy damage, so you'd want as much energy resistance as possible. And the Spectral shield that you can research has a lot of shielding, as you can see from this cruiser's fitting. 6,480 is as high as it can go. Your repair time is going to be a while, but then again, like I said earlier, to play the game in advance, you're going to want to soak up the repair time and just not care. And let's take a look at my Tridents. They're all equipped with wave drivers. They do heavy shield bypass, and again, since they do the increased cruiser damage 160%, so you'd say 90, you double it, so you'd get 180, and then you'd have to add 60, let's say 50, so you'd add 45, so it'd be 225 damage per second roughly, and a good chunk of that is going to be bypassing the shields because of how I have it fit. But that's going to be about it. I'm going to refit those ships after my Bastion's done refitting. I'm going to set some stuff up, and I'm going to playtest them during the next Decimation. I'm going to see how that strategy works, if it is viable, or the next Mobilization, depending on when it happens. And then I'll showcase it if nobody else has a chance to test it, or I'll alter the fittings and change them around myself until I find the fitting that works, as well as the strategy, then I'll share it with all of you. But it's time to get kick-started on how to jump from Tier 3 to Tier 7. It is possible, and you'll just have to work a little bit more on your fittings. But that's going to be it, everybody. If you liked the video or find it helpful, feel free to leave a like and a comment. If you want more videos, if you want to see more of the videos, subscribe. And if you would like to help any lower levels, if you have any potential builds, fits, or anything like that, or base defense ideas, or if you have any ideas in general for the game you'd like to suggest that may wind up in a future video, feel free to leave the comment below, say what you think, and things like that. But as always, everybody, I'll see you later.